But, really one of the key things I'm coming out of this weekend with is just I'm so sick of this cancel culture that we've developed in this country. And I'm sick of the tearing down of the statues, and I'm sick of the attempt to erase history. I'm just fed up with it. I'm absolutely fed up with it. And we heard a great speech from President Trump over the weekend at Mount Rushmore. They're talking about they want to take down Mount Rushmore. I mean, it's absolutely insane. I mean, and when I say they, I mean the people who are involved in the revolutionary movement that's going on in our country. They're trying to create a revolution. They're trying to upend the existing social, political, and civic system that we have in this country. And they don't even know what they want to replace it with except for pure anarchy. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing played out right in front of us exactly the end game of where their policies, whatever their policies are, which seems to be primarily destroy everything historical, right? Even including statues of elks in Portland. I mean, what did the elks ever do to anybody?
I was in the kitchen talking to Lana from QYK this morning, and she was fit to be tied. She's just very small-statured, nice little young lady, just out of her mind mad because she said she's been to, to the monuments.
Right.
And, they're going after the four heads in the mountain now. And she was just, she was violently angry.
It was just a few years. Yeah. I mean, it's just a few years ago that Bernie Sanders was out there being interviewed out there at Mount Rushmore. This was in 2016, and he was interviewed by CNN, and he was talking about how proud he was to be an American and seeing a place like Mount Rushmore. I mean, up until just, 6-8 months ago, Bernie Sanders was like the king communist. He was like their main leader for their communist movement, for their resist movement, for their revolution, whatever you want to call it. And yet he was able to say that Mount Rushmore was a place that made him proud just a few short years ago. And now the same CNN refers to Mount Rushmore as a monument to 2 slaveholders. I mean, it's just absolutely insane. But, they're talking about wanting to blow it off the side of the mountain, like dynamite the thing off the side of the mountain. Why would you destroy something so beautiful? I mean, think about the economic impact. I mean, what is there to do in South Dakota? Why does anybody ever go to South Dakota other than they're involved in fracking? In all seriousness, I'm not joking. What's the reason to go to South Dakota? You want to go see the Black Hills? I don't know. I never hear about that. The only thing I ever hear anybody want to go to South Dakota for is to see Mount Rushmore.
Of course.
So what's the economic impact? What about the people who have businesses that serve the tourists that come to visit there? Do we care about them? No, because we don't care about anything involving commerce or people's livelihoods. If all we care about is this revolutionary struggle right now, and I'm okay. Let me be fair, because that's not all we care about. But these people that are rioting, and that's what it is. I am sick of these rioters being called protesters. There have been peaceful protests, and I support the concept of peaceful protests. But when you're vandalizing something, when you're committing acts of violence against innocent bystanders or people who happen to be passing through, say, in a car, when you're tearing down a statue or statues, when you're setting fire to buildings, those aren't peaceful protests. Those aren't even protests. Those are riots. That is just outright political violence for a political end.
I think one thing people need to step back and look at the reason that we have statues and monuments. And is it to honor people for what they've done? Yes, for their accomplishments. But human beings are inherently imperfect. And so every statue of every person that exists, or every person you would want to have a statue of, has done things in their life that are not perfect. And so I think that's one of the big picture things you need to look at when you're talking about these historical figures and statues is it's a moment in time, and no one's saying the bad things that they did are what they're being exalted for.
I thought it was just a reminder. Every time I look at one, a reminder of history.
Yes, that's the bigger picture.
Well, and, he who controls the present controls the past, right? This is like 1984. He who controls the present controls the past, and he who controls the past controls the future. That was one of the mantras in the book 1984. I may not have stated that exactly perfectly because I'm just going off of my memory, but that was one of the mantras in the book 1984. And it talked about how every date had been changed, every statute had been torn down, every name, every event had been subtly altered in some way to the point where people lost complete touch with any kind of set reality. And all they could count as reality was whatever the state told them that moment was reality. So literally, if you've read the book 1984, it's such a perfect prediction of what we're finding ourselves in today, because people have had their attention spans so shortened, they've now been threatened with any kind of deviation from whatever the accepted story is currently. And we'll tell you some stories about that, hopefully in today's show, if we get around to talking any details here. But, you know, they've been threatened not to think outside of whatever the accepted politically correct narrative is. And it was just like that in the book 1984. In fact, one of the ongoing pieces of the plot in the book 1984 is how they would have these moments where everybody would get together and sort of stand in a collective rage, and they would be shouting and they would be angry at their enemies. And there was two enemies that they had, and what they would do is they would switch them. So sometimes they would be at war with this conglomeration of countries known as Oceania, and sometimes with a conglomeration known as Eurasia. But they would always say, we're at war with Eurasia. We have always been at war with Eurasia. And then, like, the next day, the little speaker boxes, which, I mean, it's amazing how close, George Orwell got to what we're actually facing with our smart TVs and other things. It's these TVs, essentially. I mean, they didn't, have them in the form that we're familiar with today, but these flat panel screens in your house that had cameras and microphones so that they could watch you and they could tell whether you were being a good little servant, a compliant little citizen, whether you were properly responding to the inputs coming from your little talking screen. And so, the inputs would tell you, okay, we're going to have the moment of rage, the 5 minutes of rage or whatever. And, we have always been at war with Oceania. And then the next day it would be like, we're at war with Eurasia, and we've always been at war with Eurasia. And all the people would be like, we hate Eurasia. You're going to kill Eurasia. And the primary character, the main character in the story, he could remember this. Like, yesterday it was Oceania, now it's Eurasia. But people, they were trained not to think like that, just to blindly accept whatever the screen was telling them, because you start thinking like that. You start remembering what happened, just 3-4 months ago, where they said, don't wear masks. Masks don't help you at all. Masks are proven not to protect you from this virus. I mean, look, simple science will tell you that the masks don't have, small enough openings, particularly the ones that you're making out of your old T-shirt, right? That's what they're telling you. Make one out of your old T-shirt. Oh, okay. Why don't you just make one out of pantyhose? It's a face covering. Because the point is, none of these stop the virus particles, which are smaller than the little holes in the mask. None of them, not even the N95s. They do not block particles small enough to stop the virus.
But it allows you to get into Publix.
But it lets you into Publix, right? And be careful. Don't question these kind of things, because now, all of a sudden, now we're not at war with Oceania. Now the mask is not bad. Now the mask is mandatory. The mask is good. It's the only thing that's going to save you. And if you don't wear the mask, you're like killing people. Right? I mean, this is, and people buy into this stuff. I mean, I ran into a lady in the hallway, luckily not in this building, but I didn't have my mask on. And she gave me a look, like this look of abject terror entered her eyes as we came face to face. And she had her little hand-sewn mask on, with little colorful fabric. And she looked at me, an unmasked person, you might kill me, or you're killing other people. You don't care. No, I just remember 3-4 months ago when they said don't wear the masks. So what's changed? Thank you for listening to the Morgan Streetman Show. We hope you enjoyed what you heard, and if you did, please click like and subscribe to help us out. And remember that we recommend that you exercise your brain at least once a week.